Hello and welcome all of you. I am Christy Carney. This is the PFLAG Los Angeles support meeting, one of 3 meetings that we have. We also have a Spanish language meeting and we have a gender focused meeting. Then they are all monthly meetings in addition to this one. Tonight we have an amazing speaker who will share their journey with us. It's Cody Orians, and they are a writer and sexuality educator living in Columbus, Ohio. They are the creator of AceDad Advice, a social media-based asexuality education project. It's designed to support people exploring asexuality or questioning their sexual orientation. Their passion for education and support queer youth stems from 10 years in the classroom and many more as a freelance teacher and artist. For their online work, they are nominated for the 2023 British LGBTQ Award for Online Influencer. Congratulations. Cody also leads trainings and workshops focused on ACE and ARA inclusion, as well as in sex and relationships through an ACE-ARO lens. Their young adult book, I Am Ace, Advice on Living Your Best Asexual Life, is out now. Their second book, The Ace and ARO Guide to Relationships, comes out in 2024. They are queer, ace, and agender, and we are so lucky to have them tonight. This is going to be a phenomenal experience. So with that, I'm going to give the floor to Cody.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here and talk to you about my favorite thing to talk about, which is asexuality. Let me share my screen. I can walk through some slides and we can get right started. So the first question, to begin at the obvious place, what is asexuality? So most answers to that question will be using the definition crafted and popularized by the Asexuality Visibility and Education Network, or AVEN. Now, AVEN is the leading organization for asexuality information, visibility, and support. And the AVEN definition is that asexuality is not or rarely experiencing sexual attraction. That's a very straightforward definition. It's really the nuts and bolts of it, that asexuals don't or rarely experience a sexual attraction. But I always find that sometimes that definition can bring up some questions for people. So I wanted to add some other definitions to give you a better context. I think another useful definition to add to this is one that was put forward by queer activist Lisa Orlando in her 1972 piece, The Asexual Manifesto. So back in 1972, Orlando described asexuality as relating sexually to no one. Now, I like this because it expands that AVEN definition outward to include other people. So you get not just a sense of how the asexual person is feeling within themselves, but you're also understanding a little bit more about what asexuality may feel like in relation to other people. The last is a very new thing I came across. There was, I think it's like in the last 2 weeks, an Italian research paper on asexuality came out. And in it, they defined asexuality as an absent, low, or situational sexual attraction to individuals of any gender. And I love that because I think it speaks to all the things that the other 2 definitions do, but also really very clearly demonstrates the spectrum quality of asexuality, that asexuality is not just one thing, but there are lots of different ways that asexuality can present and exist. And like, I love this. The new paper is very cool generally, but that I think is a very useful bit of definitional language. And so, like, taken together, all of these definitions, not or rarely experiencing sexual attraction, relating sexually to no one, absent low situational sexual attraction to individuals of any gender, gives us an idea of asexuality as a way we can talk about the lived experiences of people who interact with sexual attraction in their lives in ways that sit outside of what we might expect, that absent, low, or situational experience. And the asexual experience and spectrum can contain a lot of things that look in many different ways. So asexuals can have a variety of different relationships with sex, for example. Some ace folks do have sex, some don't. For some, it is a sometimes or rarely situation, but in general, lots of different relationships to sex for ace folks. And asexual folks can also have a variety of different relationships to relationships. So some are seeking romantic and partnership relationships, some are not. Some are seeking non-traditional forms of relationships, like a queer platonic relationship. Some are just seeking like platonic networks of support. There are many different ways that we can see asexuality inhabited, many different ways we can see asexuality expressed in the world. So the next question is asexuality a sexual orientation, really? My answer is an enthusiastic yes. I'm like obligated to say that it's a yes, but here's why. When we talk about sexual orientation, what we are talking about is a pattern of experience over time of sexual attraction. Sexual orientation is a big picture view of how we as an individual experience sexual attraction. So, yes, asexuality absolutely fits that bill. Not or rarely experiencing sexual attraction over a period of time as a pattern in your life is one of those sexual orientation patterns that are possible. Some people might say, okay, but nothing's happening there. Like nothing's happening there. So how can nothing happening be a sexual orientation? Not experiencing sexual attraction is still having an experience. Just because sexual attraction may be less present or not present in a person's life, they are still experiencing some relationship to sexual attraction in their lives. And it is important for us when we're thinking about asexuality, just because there's a component of understanding aceness that isn't there, that is there for other people, that doesn't mean that asexuality is not having a sexual orientation. Aceness and asexuality is just one of the possible orientations that are open in human experience. And finally, importantly, I think sometimes we think about sexual orientation having to be about like what we're doing. We think sexual orientation, we immediately connect that to how one might express that through doing the thing. But sexual orientation is not a description of behaviors. It is a description of attraction. So asexuality is not going to be defined by one's behaviors. That's why we can have asexual people inhabiting all those different kinds of relationships before with sex and to relationships themselves. What you're doing in your personal life doesn't necessarily take away your asexuality. What you're not doing in your personal life doesn't make you asexual. What you're doing doesn't count. What does count is your experience of attraction. So I wanted to just sort of like show you in the big picture where asexuality kind of fits in with all the other parts and pieces. If you think about sexual orientation as that big pool that all the sexual orientations are swimming in, they're all swimming there in the pool. So on one side, you have the sexual orientations that we're familiar with and that you probably identify with. We have heterosexual, bisexual, gay and lesbian, pansexual. It's not all of them, but that's a number of them. And that would be what we would talk about as the allosexual spectrum. Allosexual is a word that means folks who regularly experience sexual attraction. And as all good things in human nature, it is a spectrum as well. There are many ways that one can be allosexual, different expressions of allosexuality. And so that spectrum is the one that we are most familiar with, all those options. But in another part of the pool, we have the asexual spectrum, this spectrum of experiences that talk about not or rarely experiencing sexual attraction. So that includes the names you see here: demisexual, asexual, gray sexual, ace flux. All of these are a similar kind of spectrum and diversity of expression that you see on the allosexual side, just in the context of not or rarely having experiencing sexual attraction. The important thing to note here is that nobody's outside the pool. Nobody's sitting on a chaise on the outside. Everyone's in the pool. And that's important. Because often I think we culturally think about like asexuality as being outside of the pool. There's a pool of sexualities and aceness is outside of it, but that's not how that really works. All of these sexualities inhabit the same space. These are all the options and possibilities that are there for a human being in terms of sexual attraction and sexual orientation. They're all kind of equally weighted. They're all possible. Nobody is an outsider. Nobody's sitting on the outside. Another important thing here about asexuality doesn't mean no attraction at all. I think often we kind of imagine, if we don't know a lot about asexuality, we imagine asexuals as blank slates of people. So if they don't have sexual attraction, then it's like it's a nothing place. And that's not really how aceness exists and how people who are on the ace spectrum exist. There are plenty of different ways that we can feel attraction to another person outside of sexual attraction. Romantic, sensual, intellectual, platonic attraction, all of these are possible ways that one can feel attraction. So for asexual people, as you see, like for sexual attraction, when that slider is down to the off position, you still have all of these other on positions that are possible for you. So what is important here is that sexual attraction isn't the only way that we form connections. For an asexual person, just because they're not experiencing sexual attraction, they still could experience the full range of other things. And so have all of those attractions as ways to form connections and possibly form a variety of relationships that may interest them. Asexuality just like doesn't take you out of the game for building connections with other people. It doesn't take you out of the game for building any kind of relationship one might want. Is asexuality related to gender identity? Kind of a tricky question, but first, gender identity and sexual orientation are not inherently linked. They're related. They respond to each other. There are a lot of like complicated, like queer theory things you could add there, but we're not going to do that here. But they're not. How you understand your gender does not tell us or you how you're going to understand your sexual orientation. You can have those journeys separately, and one doesn't imply the other. So there isn't a situation like, oh, if I'm going to inhabit this sexual orientation, then that means these are my only gender options, and the other way around. That's not how it works. These two things can exist separately. They're not inherently linked. And the gender that you experience doesn't make you more or less likely to be asexual. You're not going to run into a situation where saying, oh, I am my gender identity is female, so that means I'm more likely to be asexual, or because I am transgender that or non-binary, that means I am more likely to be asexual. They're not connected in that way. When you look at the ace community, you will see disproportionate representation of different genders, but that has to do more with other social kinds of constructs and other like social norms, not the experience of gender. Asexuality is a sexual orientation of people in all gender identities. So your gender isn't going to make it more or less likely that you're ace. we do and tend to experience a very strong relationship between sexual orientation and gender identity. Like those two things inside us can feel very connected and feel very linked to each other. And those connections that we feel are absolutely real because the world that we live in, gender and sexuality do exist very tightly wound up in each other. Um, so it's important to recognize that that connection is that we feel is very real, but they don't have to be determinants of our identities. We can still sort of like look at each of those things independently and not rely on our sexual orientation to tell us, to define something about our gender, and the other way around. They can exist as separate things, but feel very closely knit up. Like I mean, like, for example, I certainly do feel like there are some strong connections between my aceness and my agenderness. Those things feel connected to each other, but I know that one didn't cause the other. Um, Now I'm going to talk a little bit about just a little bit about me and those adorable little humans that you see there in the picture as the last kind of thing I'll talk about. So, um, asexuality, I arrived at asexuality rather late in life. I'm 47 years old right now, and I didn't figure out I was ace until I was 41. So I was a late bloomer. Took me a long time, but the the experience for me of finding asexuality through Tumblr when I was 41 was a very transformative experience for me. And my journey then through going from being a very private asexual to now a very public asexual who's in the world in a very big way um, has also been a really transformative one. Not just because it allows me to do things like this or like have books and kind of like have people on the internet know me sometimes. The most important part of this like journey with asexuality is for me to sort of live in my body as a 47-year-old person and not think of myself as broken anymore. And broken was really how I understood myself for the entirety of my adult life up until 41. I just thought because I didn't relate to sex in the way that my peers did, and I didn't feel the things that my peers were saying they were feeling, I must be broken somehow. And finding asexuality and finding this entire community and language and understanding of asexuality helped me feel not broken. And through the years that I've been doing this, I have heard that word come up a lot. Ace folks always talk about this experience of moving from feeling broken to finding asexuality and learning that they're not, that they are indeed whole, authentic people. And that's important to me. Asexuality is not a brokenness or a lack of something. It is a whole and authentic way of being in the world. And when you think about asexuality, um, you maybe wouldn't think about my little family. So that's my little family there. I am the only silver-haired one there. I am there with the bald-headed gentleman. That is my husband of 10 years, Neil. The non-glasses gentleman next to me is my partner of 2 years, Scott. And the gentleman with the hat is my husband's romantic partner and my queer platonic partner, Dan. And together we are a little polyamorous family, and we call ourselves the Constellation. And when people talk about like, well, is asexuality going to limit my options? Is if I come out as ace, is that going to mean like I'm going to be alone forever? Those are like stereotypes we have about asexuality. But my little family there is one of the possibilities of what an asexual life can look like. Um, and we're standing under a very cool neon sign of a skeleton giving a thumbs up. Like that's living. I think it's important to always remember when you're thinking about asexuality, there are lots of ways to be asexual. And if you are in the place where you're thinking, I might be ace, but I don't know if who I am or what I'm doing, or I don't know if like that my way is going to be the right way to be ace, your way is the right way. How you are ace is an absolutely right way to be it. It can look like my life, it can look like whatever your life looks like, and it can look like any life that you can dream up or imagine. All of those things are possible within asexuality. Um, And that is my very quick spiel for you all. Thank you. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
We should probably stop the recording for the questions part. Thank you so much, Cody.